Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Into the Fitness Metaverse. I hope you guys are doing well and been collecting some crafting materials from Dustland Runner. Some of you guys participate in our Halloween event. I hope you had fun with our quests. You can actually go to Twitter and search Dustland, Dustland Runner, and see a lot of players share their post-mission run pictures. I see a lot of creative and great submissions from our community. Seems like a really good turnout. So really happy to see you guys share the run. Keep doing that even the Halloween campaign is over. Make sure you give us a follow on Twitter as well. You can use the link tree in the caption. You can also follow our other social media as well. Give us a like for this video and subscribe our YouTube channel, of course. And if you're new here, if you're new to Fitness Metaverse, or you just got this podcast, or if you got this episode from a friend, if you're new to us, if you've been listening to the same playlist or podcast or our podcast you listen to, let's give Dustland Runner a try. It's an audio adventure game. Dustland Runner actually has a unique storyline, and players can collect in-game items by completing their missions. The cool thing about this game is it suits everyone for different fitness level. It's not performance based. The game is not based on how fast you run or how long you can run. So it suits everyone. So give it a download. And today we have another special guest here, Dr. Chris Reed. He is also a chiropractor. He also runs some ice bath workshop, and he loves to share his fitness content with people. Dr. Chris Reed, how are you today?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Chris, tell us something about you. Let our audience know about you. Like, where do you base and what do you do? Yeah, let's get to know you a little bit first.
Sure. I'm a holistic family chiropractor. I am based out of Dallas, Texas. I graduated chiropractic school at the end of 2020 and opened up my practice just a few months after, in February of that next year. So I've been in practice almost 2 years.
Thanks for sharing your background with us. So we're going to talk about ice bath today. So what exactly is this thing? Like, how would you describe ice bath, and how long is the section? Because sometimes people might think it's a bath, right? So I need to stay in there for a super long time with a really cold water. So maybe it kind of turns some people off. So can you tell us some general information about what is ice bath?
Yeah, for sure. You can do it a couple different ways. You can keep it a little bit warmer, and, I say warm in comparison to the one that I use, which is 33 degrees, because I use a chest freezer, and a little bit warmer would be like 40 to 42, and that's just if you're putting ice in a barrel and jumping in. I would say you could stay anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes with it at like 40 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. But for me, I use the 33 degrees, and I say I'd stay in anywhere from 3 on average and maybe 5 at the max.
Got it. Okay. So actually, it's not that long time. And also for some people, some of our audience, if you use Celsius, not using Fahrenheit, 32 Fahrenheit is 0 degree, and then 40 degree is about 5 Celsius degrees. So just give you an idea how cold is it. We'll talk about what's the setup and then how you get into it later. But also, commonly when I heard of ice bath, I'll think about maybe in some sports medicine, they will give you a bag of ice or ask the person put part of the body inside to some like cold water, dip into it, which you hold with the ice for about 15 to 20 minutes as a kind of treatment or relieve some inflammation or pain. So we also heard about like heat supposed to be in the way nowadays after some research. Can you tell us more about what should we do if we have some, let's say, some muscle pain or some inflammation? Should we use those kind of ice or heat? Let's hear about it.
Yeah, for sure. So just for a second, let's kind of back up and just give a brief overview of, you could say, like cold exposure and how it was introduced. 100 years or hundreds of years ago, they used cold exposure as a way of not necessarily treating something,
Yep.
right? Like sickness or pain or etc. They used it as more of a a systemic healing, and I use air quotes, modality, right? But it was more of a systemic thing. And so kind of what you're speaking to in the sports medicine realm, they're using ice as more of a local phenomenon, right? Like sore shoulder, like a sore shoulder or sore calf, like put ice on your calf or your shoulder. And that really kind of goes against what we know about the human body and how it functions and how it recovers from injuries, etc. Right? So the way that we're using the ice here is more global, it's more systemic, and it's not necessarily a treatment of something. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So we always talk about RICE, RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation, RICE protocol. So perhaps this is not the way anymore?
Yeah. So, well, like I said, we're kind of talking about two different goals when we're talking about RICE, like you're kind of speaking to, and systemic cold exposure, like the cold plunge or something. Because, I would say that doing it in the sports realm kind of has the singular goal of decreasing inflammation.
For
right?
a specific body part, right?
Yeah, for a specific body part, which is really outdated. And to be honest, it doesn't make much sense to decrease inflammation, because if you even take a step deeper, it's like, well, why is our body producing so much inflammation in the first place? It's like the body does things on purpose. It doesn't do it on accident. So it's like we're creating inflammation because we need more repair to those tissues, right? Does that make sense? And so just to kind of bring that full circle, when we're talking about cold exposure, we're talking about influencing the state of our entire system, not just one body part, because that's how you make the most impact, right?
Yep, as you
Is
mentioned
by
earlier.
influencing the whole, not just the part.
As you mentioned earlier, the ice bath we're going to dig into today is globally, not just a specific body part, like using a bag of ice or dip your ankle or just your hand inside the cold water. It's a whole body thing, right?
Yeah, and we should kind of clear that up. So when we're talking about ice baths, a lot of people, because like you said, I hold workshops for ice baths here in Dallas, and what I see from people is the first time they jump in without much direction, they kind of go in waist or belly and below, and they keep their arms out, they keep their upper half out. But when I'm talking about ice baths, I'm talking about all the way up to your neck, all the way up to your chin, hands in, arms in, shoulders in, 95% of your body in. I've even done it where I have a snorkel, and I put a snorkel on and I go my whole body under, and I can breathe out of that thing. So the more of your body underwater, the better, and the more benefit you're going to get.
Gotcha. So that's very different than what we think about icing or even cold shower. So the temperature is really cold, like freezing, like 32 degrees or 0 degrees, and then we need to put the whole body in there for ice bath. But it could be for some people may not be able to handle it for so long. But what are the benefits? Why are you doing it? Why are you telling people about it?
Yeah, sure. So let me kind of revisit what you just said about not everybody can do it. Right?
Yeah.
So in reality, everybody can do it.
Oh, yes. Okay, good.
Yes, everybody can do it. So I do want to be clear. Don't just go from no cold exposure to jumping in a chest freezer or jumping into cold plunge at 32 degrees. If you're not ready, feel free to work up to it.
Yep.
That's not what I did. I just went straight from nothing to, in the cold. Yeah, everybody can do it, but a lot of it is just the mental fortitude part is really important when it comes to these ice baths, because it is really uncomfortable. But something that we always say in the workshops is it's not going to kill you. Like, you're not going to die. You're going to be fine. You can sit in there for as long as you need to, but it's just the mental part of it that is the biggest struggle to overcome, right? So let's talk about the benefits.
Yeah, let's hear.
Yeah, so I'm going to separate it into two different categories. So we're going to talk about immediate benefits. And when I say immediate, I mean, within, like, immediately when your body hits the ice, to an hour or two afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's extend that to even 4 hours afterwards. And when I say long-term benefits, I mean using the ice bath consistently week to week. You're going to see these benefits over the month, over the year, etc. The longer you utilize cold exposure. Okay. So let's just start with immediate benefits. So the first thing to happen when you do get under the water is your sympathetic nervous system starts to activate and ramp up. And all that means is your body starts to release cortisol and norepinephrine. Okay. And so what that does is you can say that mobilizes your body and gives your body more readily available energy. Okay. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second.
Sure.
The second thing it does is it has a 250% increase in endorphin release, right? So that's your dopamine and your serotonin. And those are commonly called your happy hormones, or they're the hormones that when they're released in your bloodstream, you have a sense of euphoria and you have a sense of feeling good about yourself, your life, etc. Right? Yep. Like it's when everything's going right in your life. Another thing is, and this can be both immediate and long-term, but it increases your neural adaptability. So it increases your nervous system's ability to adapt to stress. And why that's important is because the more that we put ourselves in controlled, stressful situations, the better we can handle stressful situations when we're not in control, right? So the day-to-day stuff that we do in our life that stresses us out or makes us upset or gives us anxiety or et cetera, that stuff will start to lose its potency because our nervous system will be better equipped to deal with some of those experiences. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I would say one of the most beneficial immediate benefits you could say is it acts as almost a hard reset to your autonomic nervous system.
Yep.
And so it's like if you have a computer and it's running a bunch of different tabs and you just close them all and turn the computer off. Like that's pretty much what an ice bath does to your autonomic nervous system. So when you have all this stuff going on, your mind's in 100 different places, you're, stressed out, get in the ice, and it's like you're not thinking about that stuff anymore. You're thinking about just surviving these next few minutes. And when you get out, all those, like I said, I'm going to circle back to why it's important to have that sympathetic activation and that endorphin release. And when you get out, your body starts to release all that norepinephrine and all those endorphins, and you get all those happy hormones in your bloodstream. So all that stress and all of the things that you were maybe dealing with before that felt like they were overwhelming, they're not even on your mind anymore, right? And it's all neurochemistry. It is subjective, but at the same, it's very objective. And it's all about changing your neurochemistry. And why that's important is because, especially right now, I know where you live, where I live, it's impossible to avoid. There's so much like anxiety, right, that we're experiencing as a society, and depression and all of these mental struggles that we're dealing with. And this is such an amazing way to naturally work through that, right? This is a natural antidepressant, a natural anti-anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I quite like your example, like just like your computer has too many tabs and then you restart the computer and then everything will be smoothly or a lot smoother than before you restarting. So I think this is a good example to let our audience to understand more. What are the benefits does ice bath give us?
Yeah, and those are just the immediate benefits,
right?
So that's what we're talking about instantly when you hit the water to about 4 hours after, because that endorphin release, that 250% release of all your dopamine and serotonin, that lasts up to 4 hours, right? And just to give you a comparison, like when you drink coffee, it does the same thing. It releases your norepinephrine and has an endorphin release, but it has high peaks and high valleys. So it goes up real high and then spikes real low. And this is not the same thing with ice baths. So it has a really big increase and then it slowly decreases. So it's not a huge crash, right? Okay, let's move on to the long-term benefits, okay?
So what is the long-term benefits if you do it regularly?
Sure. So when I say, like I said, I just kind of want to reiterate this. When we're talking about long-term, this is, you could say, weeks to months and even into years. The first thing we're going to talk about is brown fat production.
What is brown fat?
That's real. So that this is really over months and years of using the ice bath. So we have two types of fat that we store in our body. We have white fat and brown fat. And white fat, we all know what white fat is. It comes from when we have a higher caloric intake than caloric expenditure. And so we store white fat as a way to store energy, right? Mm-hmm. So if we are in a situation where we burn carbs first for energy and then fat.
Yep.
And so that fat is utilized as a way to store excess energy. However, brown fat is totally different, right? So brown fat is a metabolically active fat that is used to heat our body up. So let's talk about what metabolically active means. So a metabolically active fat means that it has more mitochondria, you could say, per pound than white fat does, right? So more mitochondria means more energy expenditure. And so what brown fat does is it heats our body up, right? Because we build it in the cold and our body's really adaptable. So the more we're in the cold, the more our body says, hey, I need more brown fat to heat our body up, right? So the more we're in the cold, the more brown fat we build. The more brown fat we build, the more heat our body produces. And the more heat our body produces, the more calories we burn, and the more our metabolism increases and is sped up. Does that make sense?
Yep, very clear.
So it takes some studies have been shown that it takes 11 minutes of cold exposure per week to have a significant increase in our brown fat production. So whether it is a 5-minute ice bath and then a 6-minute ice bath, or a 2-minute ice bath, a 2-minute ice bath, up until 11 minutes, but you need 11 minutes per week, right? Total, 11 minutes per week total. Another thing that we see with the long-term benefits, and this can kind of be in the immediate benefits too, is quality of sleep. It can, quality and quantity as well. I would say that personally, from my own experience, I have a much deeper sleep whenever I do ice bath that same day. A much deeper sleep, but I also get tired earlier in the day. Like, I don't have that sense of, well, I just need to go to sleep because it's this time. Like, I'm actually tired and I feel like I'm ready to go to bed, because it helps with our melatonin production and release, which our melatonin is what helps us, and what makes us feel tired is when our body produces melatonin, or when our pineal gland produces melatonin. Another thing that it does is it boosts immune cell production and activation. So it helps our immune system, which helps us to fight off any pathogens which make us sick. It activates our vagal system, which our vagus nerve is part of our parasympathetic nervous system for rest, digest, recovery, etc. And when our vagus nerve is activated, it decreases our heart rate, it decreases our respiration rate, and it increases our organ function, right? And so why this is important is because that's what helps us to feel calm, right? So when we talk about anxiety, it's when our vagal system is down-regulated. And so when we're talking about cold exposure, our vagal system is upregulated. So our heart rate slows down, and our heart rate and our respiratory rate is directly related to our mental state. So when our heart rate is lowered, our respiratory rate is lowered, our mental state is also lowered. Does that make sense?
Quite lots of information.
Yes, a ton of information, and I can't leave any of it out, because it's like, if you really want to get the big idea of why cold exposure is so important for every single person, right? Not just for athletes, not just for people who need some sort of natural antidepressant or anti-anxiety, but it's for everyone, right? It can benefit every single person.
Yep. So you mentioned ice bath is for everyone earlier. For our Fitness Metaverse community, it's very diverse. We have different age group, we have different lifestyle. We also have people love to do long distance running, trail running, or cycling, or even just do about 20 to 25 minutes walk. because they have the habit now. Dustland Runner mission is about 20 to 25 minutes, and then they'll go out for a walk or jog. That's their daily exercise or part of their routine. And so you see, as I mentioned, there's quite a big difference between fitness level or activity level. If they want to first start, maybe they cannot start at the same temperature, or maybe everyone start at 5 minutes. So how would you adjust, like temperature, duration, or how and what would you adjust?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share my experience about how I started cold exposure and how I ended up buying a chest freezer and doing it that way. So I actually started in the shower and I just turned it on the coldest setting, and I started with 30 seconds. And then, after a couple times at 30 seconds, I would do a minute, and then I would do 2 minutes, and then I would do 5 minutes. And when 5 minutes became not easy, but I could handle it, I did 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, I bought a little portable ice bath off of the internet, filled it up, bought 80 pounds of ice, threw it in there, and did that for 5 minutes. And then I did it for 10 minutes. And then when that became something that I could do, like I said, I bought my chest freezer, because I knew it gets about 8 degrees Fahrenheit colder than it does with just ice. If you throw ice in water, it goes from about 41 to 33. So I bought my chest freezer, and yeah. So, and then now I would say right now I do an average of 3 to 4 minutes per session at 33 degrees. But I would say at 41 degrees, or just, if you get your hose, you fill up a tub, you throw ice in there, it'll get to about 40 to 41 degrees. You could do anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So I would say start in the shower, start in the cold shower, get it on the coldest setting, and slowly increase your time until the stimulus isn't there anymore. And what I mean by stimulus, I mean when you're sitting in the cold shower and it's not that much of a challenge anymore, then you can start to go to an ice bath. And then when when 41 degrees isn't a huge challenge anymore, then you go up to 33 degrees or something colder. But something important to also recognize is that when you're in the cold bath, the ice bath, before you move up to something colder, move around or have someone sift the water for you, right? Because when you're sitting in there and you're just, not moving, that your body builds up a thermal layer. And so it actually heats up the water around you, maybe 3 to 5 degrees. So if you keep moving, you'll keep getting that fresh, cold water on you, and that will make it more difficult as we start to progress in your cold exposure journey.
Okay, so your recommendation is start with shorter time and then slightly warmer or higher temperature. It's still cold, but not like start from like 32 or 0 Celsius to start. So kind of like if I'm training for a half marathon or marathon, I don't just stick to a full marathon running section, right? I would start from maybe in 5K and then check and then slowly build up to 8K, 10K, 15K, slowly to build up, right? You might can do it, but maybe it's not the result we want to get from 0 to a very extreme point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because we're looking for, at least what I'm looking for, is something that is more of a lifestyle change. And something that I'm utilizing this as a lifestyle, introducing it as a part of my lifestyle. And so going from 0 to hero, it's hard to sustain that. It's possible, but it's just hard to sustain that. It's easier if you make it more of a progression opposed to just an event, right?
Gotcha. So let's say if myself or maybe some of the audience listening right now, they want to try out the ice bath at the home or somewhere else, what obviously you tell us your home or garage setup with the ice bath or ice tub. What other setups, if I want you to do it at home or give it a try, what other setup would you recommend? Or what other setups have you seen?
For sure. So, I mean, you can buy cold plunges that are already made, that have an internal cooling system, that have a filtration system, but you're going to be spending 5,000, 10,000. I've even seen some that are 20,000.
Wow.
But like I said, I started with a portable tub that I found online. That was about $70. And I literally just threw it in my shower, turned the shower on because I don't have a hose here. For some reason, the house didn't have a hose attachment. So I just turned it on in the shower, had the shower fill it up, and then fill it with ice. So that's the most cost efficient way to do it in the beginning if you're going to be doing it like, weekly or every 10 days or so. But for me, I wanted to start using it daily. And so going to buy ice, going to pick it up, going to put it in the tub, 80 pounds a day was not sustainable for me, right? And so I started to do a little bit of research, and I found people using or converting a laying down or a laying flat chest freezer into an ice bath, because the freezer, when you plug it in, it produces it has its own cooling system, so you don't need to go buy ice, right? So you want me to go into a little bit of how I made that, because it's pretty easy to explain, but a lot can go behind the research of it.
Sure.
Because it is the most cost efficient way. It probably cost me about $1,000 total from start to finish.
US dollars.
So US dollars, yes,
Yep.
US dollars. So I bought a brand new chest freezer, which was obviously the highest expense. That was about $600 or $650. It was a 14.8 cubic feet Frigidaire chest freezer. Then I went to, I don't know if you like what y'all's hardware stores are over there, but I went to a Home Depot and just bought some silicone and some it's this putty called JB Water Weld. And this is really important because it's this silicone and this specific putty called JB Water Weld are waterproof and can handle the really cold temperature. So I put silicone on all of the areas of the chest freezer that would leak water, that aren't waterproof, right? Like where two panels meet, I put silicone over it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I put silicone over all those panels, and then I put the little JB Water Weld putty where the silicone and the inside of the chest freezer meet, and I just put it around both sides of the silicone all the way around. So that it doesn't leak, because if it does leak, it'll get into the chest freezer and ruin it, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a way to seal it off to keep the water inside. And then some other things that you'll need a filtration system. I'd use a 90 or 100 gallon aquarium filter. I have an ozone machine to kill any bacteria that possibly gets in the water. And I also have I think it's called a grounding unit, or no. You can buy a grounding unit or a grounding plug just to keep it safe, but you always want to unplug the chest freezer before you use it. Okay, so that's super important. But I also have, what I was thinking of is I have this tool where you plug it into the wall and you plug the outlet of your chest freezer into it, and it turns on the chest freezer for a specific amount of time a day. I can't remember what it's called. Because I only leave it plugged in for about 4 to 6 hours a day.
Right.
Because you don't need to have it running all day. Or it'll just turn all the water into a big block of ice. Because the chest freezer itself is insulated enough to where it only needs to be on for 4 to 6 hours a day to keep it 33 degrees. Because it produces its own ice. So you don't need to go buy ice anymore.
That save a lot of work.
Save a lot of work. Save a lot of time, energy.
That too.
And I would also say something important to also buy. Ice Barrel actually sells it, but it's a water stabilizer. Because if you're not careful, the water, because you only have a filtration system that's used for an aquarium, so the water can get dirty pretty quick. So I'd say to buy that water stabilizer from Ice Barrel to keep it clean, and just make sure you're clean before getting in too. Because remember when you came over, I was like, hey, we got to go like wash off real quick before we get in. Remember that?
Yep, to keep the ice tub is crystal clear, because when I open it, actually it's quite crystal clear. And obviously, before we use it, we rinse off and make sure we're clean before we dive in again.
Right. And with those other expensive machines, like the $5,000-$10,000 machines, it doesn't matter if you're dirty, because they have a really nice filtration system. So I'd love to get that one day, but for me, it's just not feasible right now.
All right, so there's some different cool setups. You guys can try it out. But let's step back a little bit, because I know you use it quite often, and your training is more like long distance. Actually, what was your background before now? Because I know nowadays you're more into endurance kind of style of training. You have some ski machine, row machine, and air bike at home. So you love to do more endurance type of training. But what was your background before, and what's your achievement in your athletic career?
Yeah, so I played tennis in college for a couple of years at a smaller school in Michigan. And when I stopped playing tennis, just to keep that competitiveness going, I started to do CrossFit. And I went on a team to the games in 2015, and then went to regionals a couple of years after that, before I started chiropractic school, where it just wasn't possible for me to do both. Right. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, thanks for sharing. And the reason I ask is because your style of training kind of similar to our Fitness Metaverse community. Like I mentioned earlier, they more into the long distance running or cycling. So I think this is a new method for their recovery. They also get some idea from you, perhaps how to start, or what kind of material or what thing they want to build their stuff, what materials or what items that they should get to build their own ice tub, or at least give it a try. But the thing is, I know obviously you do more endurance type training now, but your wife actually is a Olympic weightlifter, so it's completely different type of training. Does she also use it, and how often does she use it? Because obviously for you, you're more endurance type of training. You don't train much compared to her. I just want to know the comparison in different sports. Maybe you have different need, or maybe you guys prefer different duration or stuff from the ice bath. So we would like you to know more about it from a different sports perspective.
For sure. So we use it for two totally different reasons, I guess, right? So I mainly use it as I try and get in there 5 times a week, I would say. Sometimes it's every day, but I try and get in there at least 5 times a week. And for me, it's just a part of my daily life. And for, all the reasons listed before. For her, I would say she gets in there about once a week. Gotcha. On average, and she gets in there on her off days. When she's, having a rest day for weightlifting, she'll get in the ice bath for a couple reasons. One, she has a really busy schedule. So she goes to work at 4 a.m., gets off at 12, eats, sleeps, and then goes to work out. So it's not really possible for her to do both in the same day. Because, the ice bath is a whole event, right? It's like you get in the ice bath, and then it takes you a while to de-thaw. So it's not just like a 3-minute thing. It takes a little bit for you to come back after it. So she uses it about, I'd say, once a week for, all the reasons I listed above too, but also just to help her recover a little bit better.
Very interesting to know different sports athletes use ice bath. Of course, it depends on your schedule and what other stuff you need to do during the day and during the week. But it's good to know different sports athletes use ice bath for different kind of recovery. And also, of course, as you mentioned, ice bath is for everyone. But if you haven't tried, or if you just start, don't start maybe too cold or too long, because you need to slowly graduate to let your body and your mindset get used to it, so you can maximize the benefits each time when you get into the cold water, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of retouched on that. It's like, it sounds really fun just to jump into a 33-degree ice bath and see what you can do, which is fine. Like, I think it's a great thing. But if you want to start to incorporate this into your day-to-day life, I would say look at this. You used a really nice example. Look at it as training for a marathon, or look at it as a marathon, and not this is a 1-time or 2-time thing. I'm just going to see how I feel about it, or see how I feel after the ice bath, and I'll see if I want to do it after that. It's like, you can do that, but to really see the benefits of the ice bath and cold exposure, do it for a month, do it for 2 months, do it every day for that period of time, and that's where you're really going to start to see the most impact.
Gotcha. So today we learned quite a lot about ice bath. Thank you, Dr. Chris Reed, to share some knowledge with us. We actually learned about what's the difference between icing versus ice bath. And also we learned quite a lot about the benefits of ice bath. Could be in a short-term benefit, and also if you do it regularly, the long-term benefits to our body and for our mindset as well. And also he also share, if you're newbies or if you want to give it a try, make sure you start with a short duration, slightly high temperature, and then he also talk about different way of the setup or options if you are interested to set up your own ice bath at home. And lastly, for those been playing Dustland Runner or Dustland Rider, we know you guys been doing lots of hard work, but recovery is very important as well. So as Dr. Chris said, you can start with cold shower to start off for recovery. Once you feel more comfortable with it, you can maybe start thinking about using ice bath as well. And of course, if you have any questions about it, feel free to go on our Discord. There's a fitness channel under the community category. We're happy for some discussions. Again, thank you for Dr. Chris Reed here for your time today to share some knowledge with our community. Thank you for your time. Hopefully we can catch you again soon.
Yes, thanks for having me.
See you next time.